Wow, all right. Well, from what we've seen, it seems like business is conducted a little bit differently in Japan than it is in the United States, isn't it?
That's correct, Ken. Business is conducted very differently, and there are a lot more protocols in Japanese business than in the United States.
Hmm.
So, I mean, down to when you take and accept a business card from someone, you're not supposed to put that in your pocket. No, if you're sitting down to have a meeting, you're supposed to place that down so you can see it, giving so much respect to just the business card. So, if anyone wants to do business in Japan, there's so much we can't even go through all of it in the show tonight. But you basically want to be as humble as possible and take your cues from the Japanese and listen to your protocol officers.
Yeah, I noticed that it's put a lot of emphasis and respect, and it seems very hierarchical.
Yes, there's definitely a hierarchy in Japan, which is why you want to be as humble as possible. There's even terms in Japanese where you use different verbs to describe someone who is higher than you and what they did and what they're doing. So it's very it's very interesting.
Another little tidbit that I noticed is that I saw that June, one of the housewives, was mentioning a little bit about her currency speculation and her trading activities. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right, you wouldn't expect a typical housewife to engage in amateur currency speculation, but in Japan, because it's a modest culture, you're not going to have a lot of people discussing what they do. Luckily, we get to see on the inside, what a wife is doing, talking behind closed doors with their close friends. Recently, a few years ago, it came to light that a lot of Japanese housewives are engaging in currency speculation because they want the savings of their family savings to work for them, and they can't always take on traditional jobs because they should stay at home, take care of the kids. So that's something that they engage in.
I see. And why is it that they engage specifically in foreign exchange markets when they do have a local economy and they have the option to invest domestically?
They do and they don't. The Japanese economy is probably the third largest in the world, second only to China and the US, so it's a very strong economy, but there's very high inflation. And so because of the high inflation and the very low interest rates, the the Japanese community doesn't have a lot of options to get as much return on their money versus if they were to go into the foreign market.
I see. It seems like inflation has a lot to do with it, and from what I understand, that's set by the Japanese central bank. Is that correct?
Absolutely, inflation is set by the Japanese central bank.
Now, you said that inflation is high in Japan, and I know that recently the economy has been maybe not growing so much or stagnating a little bit, but if inflation makes Japanese goods cheaper for buyers that are abroad, doesn't that somehow benefit the economy, making our goods cheaper and more competitive, per se?
In some ways, it does benefit the economy because your exports are now less expensive and more attractive to foreign investors, which is the reason why there's a lot of Japanese goods that are coming to America. You have like vehicles, motor vehicles, excluding trains and streetcars. You have machinery, electronic equipment, and this trade is in the numbers of billions of dollars in trade. So there's definitely very lucrative trade in those aspects. But the downside is because inflation is going so high, it has an effect of possibly destabilizing the economy if it reaches a certain vantage point.
Right, because then the goods that Japanese people buy become all of a sudden more expensive.
That's right. So the positive effects that it has on Japanese industry are kind of offset because now the Japanese citizen has to pay more for foreign goods when they try and buy them in the marketplace.
So I guess all might come down to whether or not Japan is a net importer or exporter of goods, right?
It does in some ways, but Japan definitely exports more than it imports because
Wow,
of the inflation reason.
wow, very interesting. Well, I look forward to seeing what else these Japanese housewives can teach us about the Japanese business environment.